Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us once again for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission, as always, is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature spanning a whole range of genres to book lovers all around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I am Darren dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and of course one of your hosts and co-founder of Australian Book Lovers, coming to you today from Ghana country.
And I'm Veronica aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, your other co-founder and host, coming to you today from Wurundjeri Wurrung country.
And I'm just wondering, is the country there, has the summer switch been turned off?
Oh, yeah, sadly we're now in autumn and Victoria's gone, yep, excellent, let's make it freezing. So.
Yeah, we need to find out who's got the remote control because someone is playing games.
We were a little bit cheated for this summer, I must admit, and for it now to be switching into autumn, it's like, ah. But anyway,
we'll see. But episode 77, Veronica?
77 is a good number. I love double digits, and
yes.
I'm sure that you're going to tell me the importance of 77.
Well, I guess there is a little bit of importance to 77. Apparently, it's a lucky number that can signify new beginnings, prosperity, and spiritual guidance. And, in theory, the number 77 is associated with positive attributes like creativity, intuition, spiritual guidance, and inner wisdom. So it is said that when you see this number pop up apparently repeatedly in your life, it can mean that those qualities are being activated within you and that good things are on the horizon. So, yes, I'm with you, 77, and I like the idea of good things on the horizon.
Yeah, most definitely. And, of course, you would love to hear the bingo number, why that works. 77 is, in fact, a Sunset Strip.
Oh,
Do you
okay.
have any idea how that works?
Well, as a heavy metal fan, I know the myth of the Sunset Strip in over in America there, where the glam metal sort of began. But otherwise, no. What is the real meaning of Sunset Strip?
In fact, because bingo is put together generally by people a little bit older than the heavy metal genre. 77 Sunset Strip was in fact a detective series that was on it started in the US, but it was 77 Sunset Strip. So anyway, it was pretty catchy. So of course 77 Sunset Strip was where the office of the private investigators were, but yeah, that's where that comes from. But of course, that being late 50s, early 60s, naturally enough, you may not have heard of that. It went on for some time. I think it had 6 or 8 seasons or something, but anyway. And such is life. There you go.
Detective noir for episode 77.
Yeah. Could be. But tell us a little more about what happened in the year 1977.
Bit of a, I wouldn't say an odd year for Australia in 1977, but somewhat sombre, I guess you could say. On the 5th of January in 1977, Australia's only aircraft suicide attack was carried out by apparently a disgruntled former employee of Canellan Airways. And this air disaster claimed the lives of 6 people, including the pilot. So not something I was actually familiar with or had heard about. So
no, I don't remember that.
Yeah, I never even knew we'd ever had a suicide bombing attack on a plane. There you go. But on equally sombre news for some and maybe celebratory news for others, a new political party was formed, and that is the Australian Democrats. Which was launched by Liberal MP Don Chipp at none other than Melbourne Town Hall. Now, for conspiracy theorists out there, on the 24th of May, President Jimmy Carter gave the Australian government his personal assurance that US agencies, in particular the Central Intelligence Agency, were not engaged in improper activities in Australia, an issue that had resurfaced apparently in the espionage trial of Christopher Boyce in the United States. Now, I don't know about you, Veronica, but especially when it comes to politicians, if they go out of the way to say something, oh, it's definitely not happening, or no, that's definitely not our intentions, I suspect that maybe the truth is a little bit to the sideline there.
Yes, well, you've only got to look at some of the recordings of the robo-debt investigation that's going on at the moment, and the minister admitting that he lied to the journalist, to Laura Tingle.
Well, yes, there
because
we
he
are.
had to support the party line even though he knew what they were doing was wrong. It's like, really? Come on. We can do better than that.
I don't remember that being in the job description for that sort of money.
Must lie for party camaraderie or... Yeah, anyway. Righto, keep going.
Yes,
Let's not start on the politics, because
So-
this is about reading and writing. We're about reading and writing. Tell us more.
Exactly, yes. But obviously the CIA, they promised they weren't doing anything. No. Now, as far as writing's concerned,
Yes.
for those crime writers or murder mystery writers that want a little bit of fuel to work upon their next bestseller, anti-drugs campaigner Donald Mackay disappeared near Griffith, New South Wales in 1977. Now, he was presumed to have been murdered for many, many years, but actually a murder conviction was actually reached back in 1986, but what's that, 9 years later. But yeah, so a little bit strange. Obviously, there's a few tales that come out of Griffith, New South Wales. But in 4th of September, the Queensland government bans street marches and demonstrations. There we go. Talk about stepping forward and becoming a place of sunshine and freedom.
Craziness.
Now, yeah, it is a bit strange, isn't it? Now, I assume that's been reversed at some point, hasn't it? Haven't caught up with the politics
hope so,
there.
but you never can tell. Sometimes there's these odd little bits of legislation and stuff that still stays out of the way, because of course at the moment up in Sydney it's the World Pride. All the events are happening up around Sydney, and the Mardi Gras, the big march, will be happening, or is about to happen, or it's just happened, I can't remember now. However, I've been watching a little bit on how it all first started, and of course now there's a lot more celebration, there's the embracing of diversity and all those kind of things, but it wasn't easy to begin with, and there was some pretty rough and violent marches, in the very early days. And, now they're even, talking about the investigations into the deaths of, gay men around New South Wales police and all those kind of things. So, yeah, it's good sometimes to look back and go, yeah, okay, we've come a long way. Even though sometimes we think, oh, we've still got a long way to go, it is good to see some progress.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's as dodgy as it looks back then, and as dodgy as it looks today. But there is some movement between the dodginess.
Indeed. All right, is that all you've got for 1977?
Couple more quick things.
Oh, a couple more. Okay.
This one's good for all those bean counters out there. In 1977, the High Court of Australia ruled in the case of Cridlin versus Federal Commissioner of Taxation that a group of university students avoiding tax by claiming to be farmers were acting legally under the provisions of the Income Tax Assessment Act 1936. So, now I will be looking into this later, because I am growing vegetables in my garden, and I'm wondering, does that count me as a farmer? Now, in 1977, Ruth Park's novel Swords and Crowns and Rings won the Miles Franklin Award. Television soap operas, now these are two very popular ones, The Restless Years and Cop Shop, began, so that makes it a pretty epic TV year in Australia in 1977. And as far as inventions, here's a little bit of technical flex from Australia. The Laser Airborne Depth Sounder was created, or invented, shall I say, which is an aircraft-based hydrographic surveying system used by the Australian Hydrographic Service, or otherwise known as AHH. It's a system that uses the difference between the sea surface and the sea floor as calculated from the aircraft's altitude to generate hydrographic data. So there you go. I suspect that's been copied and used around the world since then.
Yeah. Not something that I've come across, but there you go. Can I share with you some of the School of Literature, Languages and Linguistics? There some B's, some of the odd Australian idioms that we have.
Loving the letter B, but it's a little bit bit of a tearjerker though, because there's only 2 letters left, or one after today.
I know, right? But it's all right. I've got lots of other things lurking in the wings to share with our readers and listeners. So I'm sure you know this one. To do a Bradbury.
Actually, you've got me stumped there.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So it is to be the unlikely winner of an event or to win an event coming from well behind. And the phrase comes from the name of Stephen Bradbury, who won a gold medal in speed skating in the 2002 Winter Olympics after his opponents fell. And he just skated through. It was about fifth, I think, and they all fell over and he won because he stayed on his feet. So, yes, doing a Bradbury is, called, being an unlikely winner of an event or winning an event by coming from well behind. So there you go. That was good. We loved it. I remember watching that and thinking, oh, that is just so classic. Because he's a Queenslander, of course, and what on earth was he doing involved in speed skating? But there you go.
Well, the art of speed skating or any sort of skating is staying on your feet. So if he could stay on his feet better than everybody else, that makes him a champion.
That makes him a champion. He was the winner. Yeah, very good. All right. My second B word for today is bung.
Oh, okay. Bung. As in, I was going to say bunghole, which would be used for maybe surfing or other things.
Yes, on ships and yachts and those kind of things. All right. So it also means in Australian idiom, and I would have pick this one, incapacitated, exhausted or broken, as in the telly's bung. So it comes from bang, meaning dead, in the Yagara Aboriginal language of the Brisbane region, and it found its way into 19th century Australian Pidgin, where the phrase to go bung meant to die. And the term's often found in this kind of phrasal form, and of course it now has several meanings: to be financially bankrupt, you bung, to fail, collapse, to break down. So there you go. Things are bung.
Wow, yeah, I've never heard that out there in the wild.
Yeah, that's something that I'd say I use a little bit, so perhaps it's an older term. All right, I'm going to give you another B, which I am sure you have heard of, and that is in fact bunyip.
Oh, yes. Sometimes cute, sometimes scary.
Indeed. All right, so particularly for our international listeners, a bunyip is an amphibious monster supposed to inhabit inland waterways, and descriptions of it vary greatly. Some give it a frightful human head and animal body, and many descriptions emphasise its threats to humans and its loud booming at night. And as we said, it inhabits rivers, swamps and billabongs, which are the kind of dried up waterholes of rivers. And the word comes from the Aboriginal Wathaurong language of Victoria, and first recorded in the 1840s. And you can, have a look at a lot of Indigenous mobs have a slightly different take or stories and songlines around the bunyip. But there you go. It's something that colonial Australia kind of embraced. There you go. So those are bees.
I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised the bunyip hasn't infiltrated our pop culture on a bigger basis, really. It's never, I don't think it's been used in a movie, has it? For fun or for scares, or
as the bad guy, the villain? No.
Well, either or, yeah.
But you're the horror person, Darren, so you would be the one that knows. And if you don't know, well, I don't think anybody does.
Well, everyone pulled out their violins because I wasted a few dollars on Cocaine Bear. So I'm sure Australia could do a lot better with a bunyip movie.
Oh dear. Yes.
Oh dear, indeed.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I think it might be time for the news.
I think on that note, absolutely. Let's go to some news. So the temperature might have dropped just a little bit. I know I think just over 40 at the start of the Fringe, but the Fringe is still in high gear, and so is Australia's Writers' Week. So for this part of the news, I thought I'd just run through a couple of events that are happening on Tuesday the 7th of March and Wednesday the 8th of March. So if by chance, listeners, you are enjoying the podcast, well, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and you are in Adelaide or on your way to Adelaide over the weekend and they're going to be here on Tuesday or Wednesday, here is a few really cool and, might I say, free events that you can attend as part of the Writers' Week, as part of the Fringe here in Adelaide. Now, the first event is called The Politics of Pandemics. So it's described as, how should we judge Australia's response to the pandemic? We were quick to declare a pandemic, to close our borders, to grow COVID in a lab, but we could also have done better. The pandemic divided the Federation and our government failed to protect the elderly or the young. Our COVID report card is mixed. Join the Age's chief political reporter, Chip Legrand, and renowned epidemiologist Raina McIntyre for a fascinating conversation. And that is the politics of pandemics. That's on Tuesday, the 7th of March. So that's at 9:30 a.m. on the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden on the Eastern Stage or East Stage. And again, tickets are free for that one. So yes, I think we've all got an opinion on the pandemic, and I guess what an opportunity to roll up, have a coffee, and join us, or at least be part of the discussion and see what has to be discovered amongst the conversation. Now, the next one, this is the one I was really interested in, is called Money, Murder and Megalomaniacs. Now, Bill Broder Live is the author, and he will be streamed in from London. Now, Bill Broder's company, Hermitage Capital Management, has been the largest foreign investor in Russia since 2005. Now, this has given him a unique insight into how Russia works. His conclusion in his new book, Freezing Order, is that Russia is riddled with corruption and human rights abuses, and that its exercise of influence in elections overseas is, to say the least, deeply troubling. Browder explains why he spent the last few years advocating for countries to adopt the Magnitsky Act. And I did speak about that on one of the previous episodes. It's very, very amazing tale that he tells. But that is Tuesday the 7th of March. Now, that's at the same time, 9:30 a.m. But that'll be on the west stage of the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden. And again, those tickets are free for that one. Now, to celebrate an Adelaide author, an event called Escaping. So Adelaide author Shannon Byrne's haunting memoir called Childhood details the poverty, neglect and domestic dysfunction the author faced while growing up in suburban South Australia. Moving between first and third person perspectives, the memoir provides a window into the series of traumatic familial relationships that contributed to his turbulent childhood. Burns reflects on his experiences, what it means to make it out, and the hope that can be found in literature. And that is also Tuesday the 7th of March. That's at 10:45 a.m. and that is on the west stage of the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden. And again, tickets are free. All of these events I'm promoting at the moment are free. This one should perk the ears of many a writer out there that may be enjoying the festivities of the Fringe here in Adelaide. This little event is called My Editor and Me. So about this session, Holly Ringland, the author of The Seven Skins of Esther Wildling, is in conversation with Catherine Milne, publisher and head of fiction at HarperCollins Australia. So many an editor has described herself, and yes, it is usually a her, as a handmaiden to the creativity of the author. What does an author want from an editor? Should an editor be there to tell the truth, to act as a one-person cheer squad, or as an intelligent interlocutor? Oh, there's a word I've got to look at and say. I've never said before in my life. What is it?
Interlocutor, yeah.
Yeah, as an intelligent interlocutor. And what is the 21st century equivalent of the editor's blue pencil? Some of our finest editors talk with their best-selling authors about the editorial process. Now, that is Wednesday, 8th of March, 9:30 a.m, the north stage of the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden. And that'll be really interesting to hear, really that relationship and the ins and outs between an editor and an author.
Very good.
Now, the next one is also, I think, hopefully going to prick the ears of any authors out there, or people about to take the journey of authoring, or people about to take the journey of publishing, because this one is called The Perils of Publishing. So publishing books on topical issues can be a health hazard, requiring deft footwork to avoid defamation suits, suppression orders, risk-averse publishers, cautious lawyers, and, most particularly, litigious subjects. Veteran journalists and authors Louise Milligan and Adele Ferguson revisit some of their most challenging projects with Michael Bradley, a lawyer who has steered many an author through this process. So, The Perils of Publishing, that's really cool, actually. East Stage, Wednesday, 8th of March at 12 p.m. And again, tickets are free. So that is my little bit of news for the Fringe, just so that we can get in time for the podcast to come out. And if you are in Adelaide or about to be in Adelaide and any of those perks your interest, jump on, have a look, rock up, grab a cuppa, grab a beer, grab a wine, grab a champagne, grab a bottle of water and a hat. Hopefully we'll have some sunshine and enjoy a few of those wonderful events.
Excellent.
What about you, Veronica?
As if there weren't enough things going on in Adelaide, also have to start thinking about the Melbourne Writers Festival, which happens from the 4th to the 7th of May. And while the program's not fully booked in yet, some of the programs are already, booked up. The Melbourne Writers Festival works with schools, and they have a schools program that encourages young people to be inspired and delighted and talk to those in children's and young adult literature. So all the primary school sessions are completely booked out, and the secondary school sessions I'm sure won't be far behind, but keep your eye out on that. So that's the Melbourne Writers Festival. A few other announcements is that the Stella Prize long list actually comes out tonight, the night we are recording. So by the time we go to air with this episode, that long list will be out, which is fantastic. The Children's Book Council of Australia Notable Books 2023 has been announced, and really delighted to see that Kate Foster, one of the Australian book lovers,
that's
has
awesome.
got the bravest word out there, which is fantastic. Lovely to see that.
That is incredible. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is. And look, there are some great books in there as well. A number that I've seen. I thought, oh yeah, there's that one. So too long to read, otherwise it will take me forever. But please have a look and give those people a cheer. New South Wales Premier's Literary Award shortlist. It has been announced. Again, some fantastic stories and books in there. The Queensland Literary Award nominations are now open, and they don't close till the 14th of April. So get in there to the State Library of Queensland, so slq.qld.gov.au, and have a look at the Queensland Literary Awards. And if you qualify, that would be a good one to submit to. There is... for writers of short stories and emerging writers, Melbourne On Sub is looking for stories of up to 2,500 words to showcase at their Melbourne On Sub Emerging Writers Night. And if your piece is selected, you'll be reading it live at their event on the 2nd of May, and you'll score a 3-copy bundle of Meanjin Quarterly, which is fantastic. So you have to look that one up on Facebook, was the link where I found that one. And I did have a look and got some information from there, but easy enough to follow up. So yeah, there's a little bit of stuff happening at the moment around competitions and long lists and awards and those kind of things. But that is my news for today.
Well, a bit of a jam-packed news episode for 77, and so much happening, like you said, and there's still lots more to come for the Fringe and the writers' stuff, and I guess things moving over to Melbourne, and then there'll be stuff all around Australia. So, and I think it will perk a lot of interest in publishers too, I would suspect. So
Yeah.
I'd imagine that the writing competitions will start to really ramp up as well. So it might be something I'm going to have to make a huge effort at getting my finger on the pulse of, so we can start letting all of our listeners know about all the really good writing competitions coming up.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and the other news part I almost forgot. So I do have a little Opal giveaway to any of our listeners that are happy to hit the feedback button and suggest a better word than fantastic to use on the show. So I don't know, how do you think we should do it, Veronica? Should it be a random pick, or should it be the best word?
Or I think the word, given that you are the person that says fantastic the most, that you should pick a word that you think you can say instead.
Okay,
So
that's
the best fit, I reckon.
the best fit.
Yeah.
So if you can come up with a word that you think can replace my overuse of the word fantastic, that would be absolutely fantastic. And, so hit the feedback button on the website. Let us know your word and your details. And if the word is the perfect choice to replace fantastic, we will happily, or I'll happily send you an opal. So there you go, a little
Excellent.
bit of Australian gemstone for the Australian Book Lovers podcast and website. So I guess the real important part of the show, of course, is the wonderful special guest. And I'm not going to say fantastic, I'm going to wait until we hear what word is, but the amazing guest that you had the opportunity to have a chat with.
Indeed, absolutely brilliant to chat with Kay Kerr and about all of her books, but particularly her latest book, which is Love and Autism. So I had a wonderful chat with Kay, and it really fired up my imagination in a whole range of ways. So very happy to introduce her when we get to it. But are we going to do Reader's Cafe first, Darren?
Oh, absolutely. We just wanted to wet the whistle of our listeners and let them know what a fantastic interview is coming up.
Yeah.
But yes, so much news and so many weird things happening in Australia in 1977, and bunyips and bungholes, or bung, should I say. Let's jump into the cafe and have a bit of a coffee before the beautiful interview.
Sounds good.
So here we are. I guess it's almost time for the old log fire and beanie already.
It's really sad. It's really sad that we've kind of gone, straight from cool glass of wine to hot chocolates again. But such is life.
Yeah, such is life. But there is something very special about the warmth of a cafe on a cool, shall we say, autumn evening or a dark autumn day. Mm-hmm. And of course, the best part about autumn and winter is it gets dark early, things slow down a little bit, and there's a lot more time to read usually. And so I'm looking forward to, hanging up the snorkel and the surfboard for a bit, because the sun won't be going down at 9 o'clock anymore. And that means lots of time to read. But I reckon you've had a bit of reading done as well, haven't you?
I absolutely have. So I have, in fact, read 28 of my target of 125.
I'm so jealous of all your reading.
As I say, when we introduce, I am a voracious reader. I just wolf them down. I was doing a Zoom meeting with a colleague. We were doing some client work, but she said, "What's that pile of books you got on your desk?" And I said, "Oh, these are just a few of the ones that I'm reading at the moment." And I showed her to her, and she goes, "How does your brain cope with all that? It must be really confused in there." But actually, it's not. They are. I really like having a few things on the go. So what I've been reading is audiobook. I've just finished Breathe, which is by Penny Russin. It's a YA series based in Tassie, which is absolutely brilliant, about a young woman who has magic and it's all connected to the sea, and that's really interesting because I know some of the places around Hobart that they're talking about. I've also just finished Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. So it's an older series that I found in a bookshop down at Queenscliff, where we happened to go on the weekend, and that was actually quite good. Not quite as gruesome as, say, J. Christoph's Nevernight, which I absolutely love, but this was really quite good as well. I've been reading a few just sort of supernatural mystery ones, just that I get on ebooks and whiz through. I read A Country of Eternal Light by Paul Delgado. Didn't quite do it for me. It was an interesting story. I also finished reading Peter Hamilton's two massive sci-fi books. There was Pandora's Star and also Judas Unchained, which was the second one. And I just love getting immersed in such complex technological worlds, which is good. One that I want to talk to you about is Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluen. So she was one of the guest writers or guest poets at the Macedon Ranges, the Mountain Ranges Festival? What do we call it? Yes, the Mount Macedon? Anyway, the Writers' Festival that was up at Mount Macedon a little while ago. And I was really thrilled to have Evelyn sign a copy of Drop Bear. So it's been really well regarded. It's won a whole stack of prizes, and it's quite a thin tome, but it's poetry and prose, and it talks about, I told you this was a thirst so great it could carve rivers. It's a fierce debut from award-winning writer Evelyn Araluen. It confronts the tropes and iconography of an unreconciled nation with biting satire and lyrical fury. It's just brilliant and really interrogates the complexities of colonial and personal history with an alternately playful, tender and mournful intertextual voice, deftly navigating the responsibilities that gather from sovereign country and all things so beautiful and settler colonial. And look, it's just fantastic. I absolutely loved it, and some of them were as it says really fierce, but just brilliant to read. So that is one I definitely recommend, Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluen. So there you go, that's where I'm up to with my reading challenge.
Also, wide gap between Drop Bears and the technology of Peter F. Hamilton, that's for
yes,
sure, and all things in between.
Indeed. So, Peter Hamilton's books are about 900 pages, and Evelyn's are not that many, 112 pages. There you go. So different, but the impact of both, really good.
And,
So
and
that's
I-
it.
yeah, it's interesting. I know some people prefer to just read one book at a time, and sometimes that's what I do. But I can also read several at a time. It's kind of like Netflix, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You flick in between your stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the things that I'm reading at the moment, I usually have a non-fiction one going. I often have one about writing. So I'm reading, well, I guess it's about writing, The Tough Guide to Fantasyland by Diana Wynne Jones, which it's great and hilarious, very tongue-in-cheek. And then I'm reading Sand Talk by Tyson Yunker Porter. As I've mentioned before, I'm trying to get myself more educated around First Nations history and culture and those kind of things. Bitter Greens by Kate Forsyth, which is just a fantasy, and just finished actually also, I haven't put it on my list yet, Terry Pratchett's The Amazing Maurice. Now you would probably like that because there's this really ragamuffin cat in it, and he's educated rodents, which is, in typical Sir Terry Pratchett style, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit quirky, so yeah. And it's good because it lets your brain try on different things, and it pokes different parts of your brain to think differently. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, not just trying different things. It's the reading lets you get dressed up in the craziest of outfits and dance and run around on stage, and no one has to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you've been reading a little lately, and you've got a review for us.
Well, yes. Finally, I've had some time to put together a little bit of review, because thank you so much, Veronica. You've done, you've been so gracious and done so many wonderful book reviews, we've had many guests do a lot of wonderful book reviews. So it was about time I finally did one. So I thought as part of the Readers Cafe for episode 77, I might finally join the review gang, shall we say, and finally do a review. So I'll leave it as a little surprise, and here we go, a little bit of a review from myself. Cancer, My Greatest Teacher, is a biographical reflection of physical, mental and spiritual journeys by author Dr. Teresa Taupik. I don't think any of us would know anybody who hasn't been touched in some way by the heartbreak that cancer so often brings. And having lost several family members to the disease, I actually began reading Dr. Teresa Taupik's book, believing I would be, sharing her medical journey and possibly having that opportunity to learn a little bit about cancer on a deeper level than I currently have as a mere observer. Cancer, My Greatest Teacher, however, delivers so very much more. And if I were asked to retitle the book, which of course I won't be, but if I were asked to retitle the book, I might use Teresa, Cancer's Greatest Foe instead. For if I could describe the biography with only one word, that word would be power. Ultimately, this is not just a story of cancer, but of a woman who has striven for success throughout her life. We follow her journey from her homeland Poland all the way to Australia, with intimate revelations about the difficulties of learning a new language, of becoming, part of a new way of life, and of betting against the odds to grab with both hands the opportunity to become a doctor, which, as you will read if you do dive into the book, is not easy at all. It is truly an absolutely fascinating read, and a really vivid opportunity to see the life we take for granted here in Australia through the life of someone from the other side of the globe. The tenacity Dr. Taupik maintains through so many trials and tribulations, I think, will inspire just about anybody who delves into the pages of this book. There are some frank, and might I even say, human discussions on love that I found really refreshing and quite brave, to be honest. And I think her ability to capture the emotions of important moments in her life across vast time frames with such ease, comfort and candour, that's eclipsed only by this deep respect for life that grows and grows with every chapter. When cancer does enter into her world, it felt to me as if a boulder had been placed in front of a roaring freight train. But the impact of her diagnosis is instead met with a calm, inner peace and confidence that rises like a rolling thunder. And that, for me, is the treasure of this book. That this rolling thunder, this individual who has worked so hard to find her place physically and spiritually in this uncertain world, has searched for and found comfort within her own skin and heart, enabling her to face mortal challenges with dignity, strength, and a quiet knowing that perhaps there is more to life than our mere physical existence. Cancer, My Greatest Teacher by Dr. Teresa Taupik is a captivating book built upon quiet power, and I have no doubt anybody who grabs a copy will be oh so glad they did.
Thanks so much for the review, Darren. It's always interesting to hear what people's thoughts are about books, and they hit in different spots for different people.
That's right. And you know what, hey, it's a little bit of proof finally that I do actually get time to read.
Indeed. Now, people will say to me, how can you read? Well, all my children have left home and I can listen while I walk and, read other bits and pieces. I sneak them in all the time while I'm having lunch, all those kind of things. All right. But what the time now approaches is, of course, one of the most enjoyable parts of what we do, which is interviewing fantastic, there it is again, I thought I'd slip that one in for you, Darren, deliberately, fantastic Aussie authors. And we have just a wonderful chat with author Kay Kerr. Kay's novels Please Don't Hug Me, Social Cue, and Love and Autism, which is her latest, is coming out in April. So we're really lucky to sneak in and have a chat with Kay before her book comes out. So that is fantastic. Did you see how it's fantastic? Without further ado, let's dive into my chat with Kay Kerr.
Really looking forward to it. Let's go.
Welcome, book lovers, to another delightful interview. I have with me the absolutely wonderful Kay Kerr. Kay is a freelance writer and author from, we say Australia, but she's, for those in Australia, she's up in Brizzy. So welcome to you, Kay.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are delighted that you're here, and I'm coming to our authors, our readers, our listeners today from Woiwurrung, Wurundjeri land down here in Victoria. Whose traditional land are you on today?
I work and live on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people.
Beautiful. And I think I'm recognising where some of the main mobs are, their traditional sort of lands are now, because I'm interviewing more people. I think, yep, okay. When I saw Gubbi, I thought, yep, she must be a Brisbane woman, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, or just north of Brisbane up in the Sunshine Coast, but yes, very close.
Nice one. Okay. We have a whole stack of questions, and for listeners, we have 3 of Kay's beautiful books to talk about, and most recently or not quite yet, no doubt it will be out before we get Kay onto the podcast. But Kay has just published, or is about to publish, Love and Autism, which is 5 true stories about neurodivergent life and love. So we've got that to talk about, which is wonderful, as well as 2 of her earlier books, which is Social Cues and Please Don't Hug Me. So I think we're going to cover our time pretty easily, Kay.
Yes, 3 books to talk about, but Love and Autism being the one that I'm most deeply sort of entrenched in talking about at the moment. So thank you.
No worries at all. Let's look at, when did you first admit that you were a writer?
I don't think for a long time that I really comprehended writing or being an author as a legitimate, realistic thing that somebody could do. Very much at school, it was, if you're good at English, you become an English teacher or you become a journalist, and that's how I ended up becoming a journalist. But the idea of writing books, even though it was something I was one of those little kids that was writing stories, printing them out, doing the illustrations, giving them to all my family and friends from a very, very young age. Yeah. But that felt more like a personal thing that I was interested in doing, as opposed to something that I ever linked to being a viable career. So then I went down the journalist path at the sort of recommendation of my high school teachers and guidance counsellor and that kind of thing, which was never really the greatest fit. But I really loved writing, and I saw that as a way to get my name in print and to be able to write. So I was doing work experience, I think, at a newspaper on the Gold Coast when I was in senior high school, and that was the first time that I ever saw my byline on an article. And that's when I sort of start to feel like I could have become a writer. That was a possibility. That was something that could happen.
Made it look very real to see those words on a page.
Yes, and it was the smallest piece. It was a tiny review of a restaurant at Surfers Paradise, but it was so thrilling, and I don't know that any version of seeing my name in print has ever felt more thrilling since then.
That's good. And yet, 3 books under your belt, looking pretty good for, saying that you are a writer. And I know that you do a number of other writing bits and pieces, including the overshare with the, delightful Anna Watley, who we've chatted to before, and she's another fantastic Australian author.
Yeah, Anna's amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Now I get to loudly and proudly say that I'm a writer, but it took me quite a number of years of being a journalist before I realised that wasn't quite the right fit. And then I saw another colleague publish a book, another journalist, and I kind of went, wait, you can do that? Like, you can just write a book? No, you don't need permission, or you don't need somebody to tell you that you're allowed to do it. So, then I sort of started to follow that. So I feel a little bit late to the party, but at the same time, I got here the way I was meant to get here. So
yeah, and everything contributes to the skills and experience and everything that you put on the page.
Yeah, that's right. And this book being my first nonfiction book, Love and Autism, it feels a little bit full circle in that way, because I'm leaning into those skills that I developed, studying and then working as a journalist. It all seems to fit quite nicely now.
Some good discipline to journalism, certainly for writing.
I think one of the things that it helps with most is being edited. I remember the first time being edited with Please Don't Hug Me, which was my debut. And my wonderful, wonderful editor at Text, Jane, being very careful and cautious, and like trying to explain to me that, this is all to make your book better, and don't get upset, don't take it on board, like we can talk it through. And she was so kind in the way she approached it. Whereas my editors, as I was coming up as a journalist, it was like big red lines through work. That's terrible. That's not working. You get so used to having other people look at and help you fix your work that it's a joy and it's a privilege to have somebody whose job it is to help you make the work better.
Oh, that's good. All right, let's talk about Love and Autism. So I'm going to read the blurb for our listeners.
Yes, thank you.
So love has always intrigued me, in part because I've carried for a long time a feeling that I'm doing love wrong. So that's a quote, and Michael made a name for himself on the hit show Love on the Spectrum. After his televised first dating experiences, will he complete his quest to find his queen? Chloe was always good at math, with feelings too big to be contained. When she reconnects with a childhood friend, it must be fate. Noor has had a lot on her plate from a young age, especially at home. People-pleasing becomes her survival mode, but Noor can't keep her struggles inside forever. Jess has spent a lifetime being put into different boxes. Through her strong will and creativity, can she break out and build a life that is truly her own? Tim is a non-speaking autistic man who has been underestimated all his life. But through willpower, technology, and a mother's love, he has a chance of finding a different kind of voice. Through the intimate writing of critically acclaimed autistic author Kay Kerr, Love and Autism presents an uplifting celebration of neurodivergent love, the search for it, and a deeper look into the lives of autistic Australians. Wow. That is an excellent story. I watched a number of the Love on the Spectrum episodes, and it was my son who said, "Oh, Mum, you should have a look at this. It's really good." So I did, and I don't remember specifically the people, but you've got 5 true stories about neurodivergent life and love. Were they all from the series? Were they people that you approached? How did you get into talking to these 5 people?
Yeah, so one of the interviewees in my book, Michael, is from the show Love on the Spectrum, and I think I had a long think about if people are coming to the book having loved that show, what would I like them to learn? Like, what's the sort of deeper delve into autistic life that I would want those readers to know? And so with my other interviewees, it was a range of ways in which I connected with them, and it was a process, and I was terrified for a lot of that process, because originally it was, what if I don't find people who want to talk to me for the book? And then it was, what if they aren't happy with how it's going and they pull out? And then what if they're not happy with the finished product? It's so much anxiety, because it was these 5 real people. There's no fictionalizing of their stories. It's very real and it's very, I guess, raw to put your life story out there, especially when autistic people are so often measured by, deficit. So they put a lot of trust in me and in this process, and I tried to make sure that the process itself was positive. The interviews that we had, the multiple interviews over about 12 to 18 months, I guess, all up was the project length. One was somebody that I connected with in the writing world beforehand. So I guess like a friend that I had known. Another couple of people I reached out through autism support agencies and connected that way. Another Nor I reached out because I was a huge fan of her writing on autism and the intersection with her culture as well. She writes a lot for SBS Voices, so I reached out that way, and I was really lucky in the people that said yes. There were, of course, people who passed very politely and understandably weren't up for it, and then the people that were up for it, I feel like we just built these strong connections because I don't know how you could not, going through, all the sort of intimate and personal and struggled parts of your life and talking about it. And of course, I made sure that my interview style was a very gentle one. I'm not a current affair putting my foot in the door and demanding that they tell me all the details. People were free to leave out what they wanted to leave out, to focus on what areas they wanted to focus on. They were involved in the process, reading drafts of it all the way through to make sure that it was being presented in a way that they were comfortable with. And right up until the book goes to print next week, we've been having those discussions about their stories and how much of that we wanted on the page. And I think sort of the discussions and the connections between my stories and their stories and their stories and each other's stories and what it will mean for readers for them to be able to have these stories just made it very unique. And at the time, challenging because I had such a high standard of what I wanted to achieve, and I held these people in such high regard and wanted to make sure that they were comfortable and happy with the result. And fingers crossed, as far as I know, I think that they are, and I hope that the publishing process is a positive one for them too.
Sounds like you created a pretty safe space for them to explore what are some really vulnerable, sort of elemental parts of people's lives.
Yeah, I just remember when I first got my autism diagnosis, which was in my 20s, I think it was about 8 or 9 years ago now, and just the desire that I had to read or connect with other people's stories and how much I wanted to know about what their schooling years looked like, what their family life looked like, what their relationships looked like, what their friendships looked like. All of that I was so hungry for that information. And so I feel like my interviewees are offering up all of these stories as a gift for readers, whether it's autistic readers who feel seen and understood and celebrated in those stories, or non-autistic readers who are going to learn and grow and understand more by reading them.
What did you learn about yourself as you're putting together, Love and Autism?
So much. I feel like a wholly different person at the end of this process than I did at the start. I feel like I learned a lot about self-acceptance. I feel like having grown up not having that understanding of self, I had developed a lot of self-beliefs and limiting sort of views of my ability or inability to do certain things that were, I guess, internalized ableism. Like I was not able to admit the areas that I needed support, or put a lot of work into hiding those elements in order to appear, inverted commas, normal, non-autistic. And so the book and the process of talking it through was very freeing in that way, because I feel like these 5 people, and there are other people involved in smaller ways as well. There are children, there are other autistic writers, there's an autistic psychologist that's been interviewed. All of those conversations taught me something, and cumulatively, I feel like my understanding of self and understanding of the autistic community, and then there was also research involved in, advocacy and how we've gotten to where we are with autistic advocacy, that I learnt from doing the research to sort of back up the stories that are in the book. So I think I held on to an idea that if I had been diagnosed as a child, everything would have been easier and better because I would have known that about myself. But one of the interviewees, Jess, who I spoke to, was diagnosed as a child. And so she's got this whole other set of challenges that she faced because the understanding at a societal and cultural level in the, you know, the 90s or the early 2000s around what autism is just wasn't what it is today. So there was a lot more stigma and misunderstanding, sort of placing her in a box because of that diagnosis. So that freed up my thinking around, everything would have been, you know, sunshine and rainbows if I had have known this about myself. There are other challenges along the way. And so it just makes me thankful that we are seeing some progress and, you know, things are different now for the current generation of young autistic people.
There are so many changes that have taken place. My sister, who sadly has passed, but she was a kindergarten teacher for, you know, all of her life. And she used to talk about how different things were to make safe spaces for kids at kinder and for allow, you know, different needs of kids who were along a whole range of spectrums, you know, neurodivergent, you know, physical disabilities, all sorts of things, as well as, you know, health things, kids who were highly allergic, how they had to change the way kinders operated and, you know, hand washing things and all those sort of bits and pieces. And that awareness of our connection with other people, I think you can only benefit from, you know, understanding people a little bit more.
I absolutely agree. And then I feel like there's another layer to it for me now because I'm, you know, raising an autistic child. And so I'm re-entering those systems, whether it's schooling or support or, you know, community at a level with a child and seeing what has changed and also the areas where there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's still a long way to go in certain areas. So I definitely feel like, I definitely hope that in sharing these stories and in publishing this book, it opens up that conversation a little bit more because I feel like the understanding of what autism is still quite narrow and quite fixed for a lot of people compared to what it actually is. So, yeah, hopefully this is an opening up of understanding.
Most definitely. And I think the swell of the tide of own voices, writers who are now being recognised and sometimes, you know, actively sought to support them to bring their stories to the mainstream, to mainstream readers, is just fantastic to see.
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot because that quote that's on the back of the book about having a feeling that I've been doing love wrong is a quote from me and my experience. And I think if I read, you know, stories written by autistic authors growing up, the range like from Anna Waitley to other authors like Jen Wild or Helen Huang or Clem Bastow, Chloe Hayden. There's so many incredible autistic voices now. Kate Foster. I don't think that I would have thought that I was doing things wrong if I had have been able to see that there were other ways of doing things, other ways of living, other ways of moving through the world and understanding that a little bit better. I think that would have been hugely validating. And I hope that that's what it is now.
When I read Anna Waitley's Petal Eyes Rating Normal, it was like, oh, holy shit, now I get a little bit more understanding about brains working differently, you know, different thinkers. And, you know, while YA is not necessarily, you know, my general read, it was just so amazingly educative to read that this is the kind of things that can work for some autistic people. As you say, you know, there's a whole spectrum and it's not everybody. But I immediately whizzed a copy down to my niece who's got a young son who has, you know, some of the alphabet, as Anna talks about. So he had
it's an incredible book.
It is such a beautiful story, isn't it?
Yeah, and it does such a beautiful job of that perspective from the inside as opposed to so much of what's written about, whether it's autism or ADHD or other disabilities or neurodivergence, is from the outside looking in. It's looking at the behaviours but not the thinking, the emotional elements, the processing that goes on that results in those behaviours. So to have a sort of inside perspective, I just think, and such a beautiful, that book has such a big heart.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge gift to readers as well.
Yeah, you're just spot on. We only see the behaviours, but we don't let ourselves understand that the person, that's just a very small part of the person, and what they're thinking and feeling is there as well. Yeah. That
behavioural sort of approach is what a lot of people understand autism as. It is, meltdowns, or it is stimming, or it is how they view other autistic people moving through the world. Whereas if you put the autistic people in that sort of position where you're hearing their story in those words through their experiences, contextualized with explanations for why, I just think that opens up the story in a way that gives an understanding at a whole new level.
Tell me, I'm interested in your thoughts. I read it was called a science fiction. It was an older one. It was probably 10 or 15 years old, by quite a prolific and reasonably famous American writer. And she has a son who was autistic. She had a number of friends and interviewed a number of people, but she wrote from a first-person point of view about this young man in the story. And I just kept feeling just that little bit uncomfortable with where she went, and particularly the ending, which is neither here nor there. But with the way she was expressing it, I thought, is that okay to write about something as deeply personal as the makeup, the way a person thinks and feels? Or is it no different from writing about a different gender, a different race? What are your thoughts about those kind of appropriations?
I think it's a complex and nuanced conversation around our own voices. And I think personally, I wouldn't write from the first person perspective of somebody with a vastly different experience, particularly if it was a marginalized identity. That for me, I just wouldn't feel like I had the ability to do that. But I don't think that nobody has the ability to do that either. I just think there has to be an understanding of why that person wants to write that story. I think there probably has to be some, or should be some level of engagement with, in this instance, the autistic community, and working through it as it's being written, getting feedback, taking that feedback on board. I think, I think there's a lot of room in that conversation for those stories to exist. But at the same time, my preference when reading autistic characters is to seek out the works of autistic writers. It
feels closer to a truer interpretation or story or whatever that might be.
Just feels like I'm not going to step on a landmine of offensive representation that's going to upset me at a core level. For me, I know that I'm in safe hands, even if the experiences are vastly different to my own experiences of life. I know that it's going to be humanized and it's going to be thoughtful. And I there's going to be books by autistic authors that I don't like, but in reading autistic representation, that's kind of my preference. Yeah.
Why do you think listeners should read Love and Autism?
I hope that they read it for an entertaining read. That's always my first port of call, is I hope that readers enjoy it. I hope that it offers insight, I suppose, into autistic lives at a depth that we don't often see, because, I do go into some quite heavy research in the book around things like bullying, loneliness, mental health outcomes for autistic people. And what I learned in that research that a key element to changing those statistics, to having better outcomes along with better structural support, is more acceptance and understanding of autism and what it is. So I hope that in some small way that this book can help with acceptance and understanding, because that will result in better outcomes for autistic people, and ultimately that's what I would love.
Yeah. It certainly sounds as though acceptance and greater understanding for all readers is going to be very much your main message there. And I often like to ask our authors this. Listeners know we send people a few questions to get them started, but are there any secrets hidden in your writing?
I love that question. I think when in the past, what I have loved with my books is finding out which little moments readers connect with, and it's never going to be the moments that I think. Like in the interview process with each of these people, I feel like we landed on little anecdotes, little stories that made me go, aha, that's amazing. That encapsulates such a wider element of the autistic experience, that I relate to that with, you know, this story of my own life. But it's, yeah, I can never pick which little moments in a book a reader's going to connect with, and it's going to be different, obviously, from reader to reader. So I'm excited to get those little, you know, DMs or emails or people coming up to me and saying, I love this part, or this part really connected with me, and finding out what those are, because there are so many of those little moments, and I hope that each reader finds something different. But that's probably about as much of a secret that I've got hidden in there.
Sounds like good secrets, though. You mentioned the editor and, you know, your experience with your wonderful editor at Text, but who else helped you when you were starting out?
Yeah, I feel like I was very, very lucky early on in my path to publication, seeking publication, in meeting my literary agent, which is Danielle Binks, with Jacinta Demase. And we met in Brisbane there's a conference called the CYA conference, which is the Children's and Young Adult Conference. There are different elements to that. There are competitions where you enter a couple of chapters and you get, you know, you can win a little prize, or you can get feedback on that and how to improve the work. And so I think I did that maybe 1 or 2 years before I met Danielle. I sent in chapters, got feedback, took that feedback on board, edited it. And then the year that I met Danielle, they were doing like a literary speed dating kind of event with different people, either literary agents or people from publishing houses. And I think you sent the first 10 pages or 20 pages, something like that, to get feedback. And then you sit down, you have 10 minutes at the table to have a chat with them. And so I think I booked that really last minute. I had my young daughter at the time, and just, it was kind of one of those, I'll just do it. If I don't do it now, I won't do it. I wanted some external feedback, criticism, something to make me feel like I was involved in the literary community and that it was a real thing. And so I went down and sat down with Danielle, and she immediately said, I want to read the rest of the manuscript. We'd love to sign you. And so depending on how the manuscript was, and it was kind of just like complete shock and overwhelm. And I was very underslept and very sort of caught up in the new motherhood world that I was in. So it felt a little bit surreal. But from there, I think just having an advocate on my side, I think particularly as an autistic author, and, you know, knowing the ins and outs of the publishing industry, which was very new to me. I didn't understand particularly how it all worked or what it all meant. So having someone who was kind of navigating that with me and for me, and sort of explaining things as they went along, so I felt anchored the whole way, so that I didn't feel those low lows as much as I otherwise would have if I was in it on my own, was hugely helpful for me.
It sounds fantastic. And I've heard only good things about Danielle. So Danielle Binks, so that is excellent. Yeah. This was then for Please Don't Hug Me, which was your first book. So yeah. I'm just going to give listeners the very little brief here that's on the Text publishing site. So Please Don't Hug Me is a funny, serious story about what happens when you stop trying to be the person other people expect you to be and give yourself a go. Erin is looking forward to schoolies, at least she thinks she is. But things are not going to plan. Life is getting messy, and for Erin, who is autistic, that's a big problem. She lost her job at Surfzone after an incident that clearly was not her fault. Her driving test went badly, even though she followed the instructions perfectly. Her boyfriend is not turning out to be the romantic type, and she's missing her brother Rudy, who left almost a year ago. But now that she's writing letters to him, some things are beginning to make just a tiny bit of sense. So there you go. And that came out in 2020. So you've had 3 books in 3 years. This is very speedy.
Yes. I'm very burnt out as a result of that, and there won't be another one in another 12 to 18 months because I'll be needing a little rest.
That sounds like a good plan. Yeah.
I think part of that was I've only known COVID book launches. I've only, that book came out a month into lockdown. It was very fresh, and it was we've all discovered Zoom, and we're doing virtual book launches, and this is fun, and it's going to be over within a few months, and this is just a novelty. And so having that, in a way, some elements of having my first book out in those circumstances were helpful to me, because it meant that I was doing a lot of virtual events or, podcasts or interviews on the phone, as opposed to in-person events. And they were already very overwhelming in that instance the first time around, because I just wasn't used to, I guess, as a journalist, when I was doing events, I very much felt like I was playing this role of the neurotypical journalist. I was acting a part, whereas publicizing these books was the first time that I had been my autistic self in public and speaking about my own experiences in such a personal way. So having an ease into that was, I think, in some ways good, but at the same time, I think I haven't really experienced, people talk about launching books in the before times and what that was like. And it just, I think there's an element of it that still doesn't feel real, or there's, there are bigger things at play. So it's hard to feel comfortable talking about your book and promoting your work when there is all these other things happening in the world. So I think the short time frame in which my books have come out, and also, I'd written my first two before my first one came out, which is the secret that nobody says. I didn't write them in that quick succession. I had another book. Everyone says, have your second, or be working on your second book before your first one comes out, so you don't end up with all of this internal pressure and sort of, writing block that happens because all of a sudden you have people looking at your work who weren't looking at your work before, and then that kind of hinders the process. So I took that on board and had Social Q ready to go in the wings. But I don't know, this, and then Love and Autism is something that I was approached about by Pam McMillan, by a different publisher. And so that sort of came to me in a very, unexpected but authentic, the way it sort of all just worked out. It's meant to have happened this way, and that's really positive. But I'm definitely going to be taking a little break after this book comes out.
Sounds good. And I love that you approach to do Love and Autism, because as you mentioned, it's a whole circle come back. You've been on the, the side of the interviewer, and then you were the interviewee, and now you're both the interviewer and interviewee as you put the book together. So I think that's great.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
I think, it's nice, because I think in the promotion of my first two books, I was, doing a little bit of freelance work and writing about my experiences, whether that was with getting a diagnosis as an adult, or my experiences with, pregnancy and childbirth and motherhood, because there's not a lot written in that space for autistic mothers. So I think that being able to have the platform to write Love and Autism gave me the opportunity to think about what other autistic stories do I want to platform, and do I want other people to hear and engage with, because there's such a wider range of experiences than the ones that we're used to seeing and reading.
After your break, do you think there are more non-fiction books out there for you, or would you go back to your YA?
I think my problem is going to be like time and mental energy, because I have so many ideas. YA feels really comfortable, and really like the community is incredible. I feel like you can't beat Love Oz YA in terms of a community to be part of. And raising an autistic young person, being around autistic young people a lot, it feels natural to me to want to write more young autistic characters. But then writing this nonfiction fed another part of my brain, and I guess of my soul, in terms of being able to connect with these real life stories. And it's funny, because I think I started naturally writing in YA because I felt like there was something very specific to the teen experience that was difficult as an autistic person. And then in these interviews, I have found that each one of these people speaks very, very much to the fact that either high school or early adulthood, young adulthood for them was their hardest time. And so that kind of felt like it fed into the work that I'd done in YA as well. It sort of solidified that, that period of change is really, really tricky, and there's a lot there to unpack and to look at. So I don't know. I definitely want to write more nonfiction, but also or YA, and also more freelance articles. So we'll just see how much time I have.
I think resting doesn't sound like it's high on your priority list there. But anyway, that's all right.
I'm not good at it. That's the thing. I need it, but I'm not good at it.
There you go. All right, let me tell people about Social Cue. This was book number 2 and also out initially with Text Publishing. As you say, you had this one in the wings. So Social Cue is, I thought I was nobody's teen crush, but turns out I was just missing the signs. Zoe Kelly is starting a new phase of her life. High school was a mess of bullying and autistic masking that left her burnt out and shut down. Now, with an intern at an online media company, the first step on the road to her dream writing career, she's ready to reinvent herself. But she didn't count on returning to her awkward and all too recent high school experiences for her first writing assignment. When her piece about her non-existent eating life goes viral, 18-year-old Zoe is overwhelmed and more than a little surprised by the response. But with a deadline and a list of romantic contenders from the past to reconnect with for her piece on dating, she is hoping one of her old sparks will turn into a new flame. Social Cue is a funny and heartwarming autistic story about deciphering the confusing signals of attraction and navigating a path to love. Kind of just the natural, when you think about it, reading the blurbs for Please Don't Hug Me and then Social Cues, and then of course you're going to have Love and Autism. It feels like that's where you were going with those.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think Social Cue is the flip side to Please Don't Hug Me in a lot of ways as well, because Please Don't Hug Me was the last few months of high school and how hard that was. But Social Cue is the first few months of being out of high school. In this case, she's in university, and what it means to sort of rebuild after those tricky months. And they're very different characters and they're experiencing very different things. And I very much wanted Social Cue to be this heartwarming rom-com kind of story, that because we don't get to see autistic characters as the protagonist in rom-coms very often, a little bit more now, but definitely not when I was writing it. I could probably list the writers writing those stories on one hand at the time. But I do love like rom-coms and love stories and talking to people about their relationships and I guess examining the social cues around romance, especially those early stages, I think is to me where I get a lot of joy out of both reading and writing, and even watching what I watch on TV and film as well. So getting to do it in a fictional way, and then with Love and Autism getting to do it in a real life way has been a real treat. I guess, it's been, writing about love has been amazing.
That's good. Tell me, you mentioned you have a young child. What sort of stories are around that are helpful when is that little one up to reading aloud and those kind of things, or still on picture book stages?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, we do a lot of reading. We read lots of, we read chapter books going to bed, or, we do audiobooks as a sort of, while we're playing on the sensory swing, or very much stories are a big part of our day-to-day life. And there are lots of books now that are sort of aimed towards self-understanding, and we and then also just stories that are celebratory. Like my daughter, very much like me when I was young, loves fantasy and escapism and magic, and
excellent.
Really, it's like really into Matilda since the Matilda musical came out on Netflix.
Yes.
We've read the original Matilda book a few times. She loves that. The Nevermore series by Jess Townsend, she loves just that escapist, like imagine if you had magic and that kind of thing. But then there are books like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Kate Foster, who wrote Pause. Pause. There are more coming. She's amazing, the amount of books that she has in the pipeline. But she just writes so beautifully and so authentically, and her stories are these quiet, beautiful, affirming treats. And my daughter loves to hear them. I love to read them. I'm trying to think, there's a book called Some Brains, which is about different kinds of brains and explaining. I just think kids having an understanding that some people are going to move through the world or process things differently to you. Just understanding the difference in that way, so that when someone says, this is hard for me, they don't think, well, it's not hard for me, so it can't be hard. And they understand that there are different ways of moving through the world, and different people have different strengths and different challenges. I'm trying to think. There's another one that was given to us by our OT, which was written, I think, by either an occupational therapist or a psychologist, which is called The Brain Forest, which is I think that's what it's called, a really, really good one as a picture book as well. But just finding different ways to plant that seed of self-understanding, because I think different kids engage with different kinds of stories as well. Yeah. So not every kid is going to engage with the same, whether it, some kids love nonfiction and informational books, whereas some kids want a high fantasy story, and maybe the characters in those stories are exploring those things. So it's just finding what your kid likes and a way in that way.
That's good. It's good. And when you were a kid, what were your favourite stories?
I was very much on the Faraway Tree, to the Narnia, to the Lord of the Rings, Classics. To the Harry Potter pipeline. That was kind of me. Anything that was taking me away from the real world and putting me into a fantasy situation. I think when you look back on it, it's like those underdog stories or those misfit kind of finding your own way when things are stacked against you, spoke very much to my undiagnosed autistic experience of moving through the world. I definitely saw myself in oddball characters or sidekicks. Those kinds of characters were always my favorite. Yeah, I loved reading. I think I dropped off a little bit in high school because of burnout, and just I think I found English as a subject in sort of middle high school got very serious, and we were sort of, I lost the joy of reading a little bit there for a while. It was judgment around what you read, and all those conversations around, I don't know, I feel like romance stories, or there's certain stories get framed as not real literature, or whether it was graphic novels, that kind of thing. So I think any kind of judgment around what I was reading turned me off reading a little bit, whereas then I found my way back through it, picking up my mum's like Marion Keyes books, or like just books, picking up and enjoying them for the story rather than thinking they were the right thing that I should be reading. Was kind of
that you had to dive in and dissect them. I think that's what sometimes English in high schools tended to do, was that what had been quite a good, nice story that you'd enjoyed then became, what are the deeper meanings? And, did you know about the author? This is why she's written this. And you think, oh, really? Do I have to go that far? I was just entertained. I didn't necessarily want to be educated that deeply.
Or even just the terror of having to get up and give a speech about about something would strip the enjoyment for me, just that sort of forced public performance. I found so terrifying that it would turn me off a book entirely. I probably can't ever look at The Great Gatsby the same since those days.
There you go. Yes, I think if I ask my children, they've all got one that they can never look at again. You're just like Heart of Darkness, I know, springs to mind. Somebody had Heart of Darkness. Yes. I think one of them was The Great Gatsby, that just, even if you just say Daisy, there's scoffing that goes on, But anyway, there you go. Let's look a little bit at your writing process, because obviously you've got writing skills from journalism. But what are you, a plotter or a pantser, or as some people prefer to say, a discovery writer, or somewhere in between?
I wish I was a plotter. I feel like it would be so much easier for my process, because I'm not. I need to go where the energy is. Yeah. And so I'm full pantser all the time, which really makes it difficult. I mean, with Please Don't Hug Me, my first draft was like 30,000 words of feelings with no discernible plot, really. There was just a lot going on, and I needed to go through then with like countless edits to shape that into something that had narrative structure. And so I have learnt through each book what the editing process asks of me and what I need to give in those spaces. So I think that each first draft has been a little bit better than the one before, but I just need to, I write like start to finish. I don't jump around with my scenes, because I don't think I would be able to go back and link them if I just had seen the random scenes floating and had to turn it all into one story. So I do write start to finish, but definitely just where the the heat is or where the energy is, and then figuring it out in edits. I wouldn't recommend that though.
No, as somebody who does exactly that and who's on edit number 7 of a ridiculously long fantasy book too, it's not the best way, but you know that's how our brain works, and so we let that happen.
Yes, that's right.
Then book covers, of course, your book cover is absolutely lovely, but I wanted to, and that was designed by Alyssa Donalo. So how
Yes.
closely do you work with your book cover designer?
Not at all. I haven't on any of these books really had an idea. I knew that I would know what I didn't like if I saw it, if that makes sense. But I have been wholly trusting of the 2 different publishers I've worked with.
Yeah.
And because I'd seen the covers that they had done, and you know, designers explain the why as to, you know, why they have designed it that way, and there've been tweaks and that kind of thing. But Love and Autism, I just loved the cover so much straight away. The colors just feel very beautiful and calming to me, and I feel like it's a really hard book to encapsulate in a cover.
Yes, yeah.
And so they've made it beautiful and appealing. They've got, you know, love heart shapes on there, and I think the green is very calming and soothing. So I haven't had a lot of input, but I've been really, really surprised and blown away and happy with every single one of my covers. I feel very lucky.
It's good. You can't ask for more than that.
I'm not able to lie, so if I hated it, I feel like I'm not able to keep a straight face, so they would know very quickly if I wasn't a fan. So I think
fair enough.
It's probably helpful. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Now, I have discovered audiobooks in a big way over the last few months, and certainly through COVID and when people couldn't visit. So there was generally, you know, plugs in my ears and I was listening to something with everything I was doing. You are going to narrate your own audiobook.
Yes, it is
How?
a challenge I have set for myself. It'll be the first time I even have an audiobook, let alone do my own narration. So I'm excited and nervous about that. I still have a little bit of residual leftover feelings about doing, you know, voice coaching in my journalism degree and being told that my voice was too flat and I shouldn't get into broadcast, basically, or I need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on voice training to fix my flat voice, which I now understand a flat effect is an autistic trait. So I feel more embracing of that and less self-conscious. But I think the story, the way in which I link together the different stories, the research, the anecdotes, that kind of thing is all in my voice.
Yeah.
So the idea of somebody else reading it was strange. I did kind of balk at the idea originally and went, oh, can't someone else do it? But I think that was, my leftover fears and judgment of my own voice, which is something I'm working on letting go of. So I think it's going to be fun. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I love audiobooks. I think they're accessible for my brain in a way that sometimes I just can't pick up a book and get my concentration to work on reading the pages. But audiobook, when I'm driving, when I'm doing chores, when I'm, folding washing particularly, or like waiting for my daughter at an appointment, something like that.
Yeah.
I love it so much. And I'm the same. It's been massively the last couple of years that I've really gotten into audiobooks. So
yeah. And there are some brilliant Australian voices out there too, which is good. Sometimes I find the English voices okay, but there's the occasional US voice that I find that I really struggle with. And I don't know whether it's the intonation. Sometimes it's made me just go and read the book. But yes. And I haven't enjoyed the full cast ones so much. I feel like it's just, there's a barrage of, noise.
Too many different
too
voices.
Many,
Yeah.
yes. Whereas if you can tell that somebody like, what's her name? Wren, who does, is it Elizabeth Wren? I can't think what her first name is. Anyway, who does a number that I've listened to. And you know that they're putting on the voice into the character, but it's perfect because it's still their voice. And I just find that works really well. So I am really looking forward to listening to Love and Autism as well as having a look at it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think it makes it accessible. I was really, YA in Australia just doesn't have the readership a lot of the time to validate an audiobook recording. But I'm really excited, particularly for the autistic or neurodivergent or disability communities, to have access to it, because I do feel like it having an audiobook opens it up to, some of the people that this book is written for in a way, So that's very exciting to me.
And it does need to be accessible. And how exciting is the news from the federal government about Writers Australia and the funding that is going to go on to, recognise electronic and digital lendings from libraries and all sorts of things. So I'm very excited that this is
it's amazing.
A good time. Yeah, good time.
It feels hopeful in that way.
Yeah.
I feel hopeful about the state of the arts in this country in a way that I don't think since I've been involved, since I've been an author. So it's really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was, as you say, mostly it was try and find an overseas agent or try and, pitch to America or England or whatever. So otherwise you will still be starving artists. But sadly, most of us are still starving if we were just relying on our book sales, but that's okay.
There are so many talented Australian authors, though, so it's exciting, and I hope that it means that there are people that are able to write who potentially were locked out of that as an option beforehand.
Yeah, and certainly self-publishing has come a long way to support the publication of some, really brilliant stories and in all genres and non-fiction as well. So, that is out there as an option.
Yeah. Yep.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about, which I saw on your website, was the Yellow Ladybugs Conference. So this is apparently on the 2nd to the 4th of May, 2023, so coming up in a couple of months.
Yes.
And it's supporting autistic girls and gender diverse students at school and beyond. So tell us about your involvement with the Yellow Ladybugs.
Yes, I have been using their resources, engaged with their work for many, many years. Since my diagnosis, basically, they've been an incredible resource. So I feel really, really honoured to be on a panel as part of their conference. Their conference last year was a phenomenal hit. They covered so many topics that are vitally important to the autistic community that just don't get a look in anywhere else. The conference is for anyone from autistic people and their families, teachers, specialists, so people like psychologists, occupational therapists, people who work in support work, who want to learn more and gain some skills around how best to support or what other things they can be doing in supporting of autistic young girls and women and gender diverse people. I don't think their full program is released yet. So when that comes out, I'm really, really excited about talking about it a little bit more because they're just talking about lived experiences, real life, day-to-day things that you face as an autistic woman or myself as a parent to a young autistic girl, that I just feel like if there's one event that somebody goes to this year that is about autism or supporting autistic people, it should be that conference. It's incredible.
Sounds really good. And you can have a look on Kay's website, although I'm sure if you Google Yellow Ladybug 2023 conference, all of the right bits and pieces will come up. So ylbconference 2023.vfairs.com and you'll find those bits and pieces. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that in the next little while. Kay, tell me best words of advice that you could give an aspiring author who looks at you and goes, oh, Lordy, she's got 3 books. Look how good she is. Look how, wonderfully relaxed and professional she is. What is your advice?
I feel like talking about publishing and the publishing industry has become a huge special interest of mine, and it's something that I'm really happy to dive deep into with people when we have those conversations, because it does feel very sort of unobtainable or hard to understand how you can get in there if you're not in there, and there's all these little things you learn along the way. So I'm definitely up for those conversations, but my advice is probably going to be really boring and cliche, but is the one that has served me the best, which is before writing, or definitely before pitching in your genre, in your category that you're writing in, to read really widely in that genre. I knew I was writing a YA, and I read a little bit of Australian YA, but I also read a lot of US and UK YA. So sort of lasering my focus towards Australian YA and what was actually happening in the industry, what books were coming out that year, who the authors, going to those books, reading the acknowledgements, seeing who they were thanking in terms of publishers or literary agents, really understanding as best I could the lay of the land of Australian YA is how I feel like I found my way in. So yeah, that would be my advice, would be to read in your genre, in your area, and to use the books as a way of understanding where the industry is at, where that genre is at, who are the people to look to for guidance about finding your way in the door.
Good advice. Very good advice.
I feel like it's, probably not original advice, but there's probably a reason that it's cliche and said a lot as well.
It is really good. And as someone who came into the writing and publishing very late, having had a completely different career in a completely different sector, it is like, where do you start?
Yeah.
But I think what you've mentioned, which is about relationships and just work your way through one door and find where things branch and who's talking about things and who's reading. And I really like the idea of having to read as part of my homework, because I am a voracious reader. And if I'm ever reading, I can just say to my husband, who doesn't read at all, he read like 4 books in his entire high school career, and he hates that all our children read as much as me. But I can say, I'm researching now. Yeah, just doing a bit of research on this one. Yeah.
I think YA particularly, you'll find every now and again a book will come out and a person will pop up and they'll be almost proud of the fact that they don't read YA.
Yeah.
And to me, it just speaks to this lack of understanding. Yeah. And it's just like, that's not something that I would feel proud of. I'd be embarrassed to stand up and say, I don't, because then you think you're reinventing the wheel. You think your book's the only book that's ever done that thing. And if you read widely in that genre, you'll understand that there are all these incredible people that have come before you that have done some version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, then to look back a couple of years later and with a little chagrin and go, oh, Lord, that was a little bit arrogant. But anyway, there you go. Hopefully they realise that and calm down a bit. So where can people find you on the web, on social media?
Yes, my favourite social media platform is Instagram. So I'm there as Kay Kerr. I have a website which I'm updating all the time with events, and I've got some other exciting events this year that haven't been announced yet. So I will be popping them up there, which is kaykerr.com, as soon as I am allowed to talk about them. I am on Twitter as well, but I feel like that's kind of, I don't know, a strange place at the moment. So I'm not using it that much.
It is odd. I must say, since the whole ownership thing, we'll just call it that I'm finding much more writing and much less politics. So I don't know whether all those people have dropped off my feeds, but I'm finding that there is a lot more in my feed about writing and
maybe I need to find your corner of Twitter and maybe I'll enjoy it a bit more.
It is quite good. We follow the Oz Rights, which is Kevin, Claire and Reb Langham. She has, they've put together sort of prompts, which I think I've book listed a whole lot of people who are on there. So that's there as well. And incredible. Anna, who was also part originally of the 6 a.m. Oz Riders. Yes. So the mad buggers who get up at, ridiculous hours to try and squeeze in a half hour, an hour before work or kids or whatever. So
I love that. Morning time is so golden for writing time. So I think that's such a good idea.
It is indeed. All right. Any final words for potential readers or writers?
Oh, okay. This is one I had to think about because you sent me the question, so thank you. And I wanted to say that the best part for me is always going to be when I'm in the flow of writing and having, nearly published 3 books now. This one comes out next month. Nothing tops that still. So you still have to just lean into that and hold on to that feeling, that joy of when you're in the flow, because that's the pinnacle of writing, I think.
It is just, fantastic. When you find that flow, it feels magic. And as the Magic Faraway did when you were a child, it just takes you out and puts you in that other world, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Time, you look up and then how many hours have passed and you haven't got up and got a drink of water or had something to eat, and just having lost a sense of time because you're immersed in the work is the most incredible thing.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Kay Kerr, very much for your time. It's been incredibly generous, and good luck with Love and Autism. I hope that it absolutely flies off the shelves and gets into the hands of everybody who needs to read it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been a lovely chat.
As always, Veronica, amazing interview, and what a special guest you had the opportunity to chat with. And I love the idea of just being in the flow, and I guess that's really one of the joys of interviewing, isn't it? When you sort of you find yourself just chatting and in the flow with each other, and
Yes.
that was amazing.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Sorry, I'm going to stop saying it. I just couldn't help
cut
myself.
a lot of opals, I think.
I love how Kay talked about, leaning into all of our experiences and skills sort of helps to make us better writers. And, she had a background that it's enabled that. But I also see that a lot of authors bring all of their experience, regardless of whether it was in writing, into what they're doing. And then they do get into the flow. And it absolutely reminded me of, I don't know if you've heard about, the father of flow. He's called the positive psychology guy, Mihaly. Now, I'm going to get the pronunciation absolutely incorrect because there are a lot of consonants, a bit hard for my tongue. So, Mihaly. So, I'm going to spell that CSIKSZENTMIHALYI. He is, as I say, attributed as being the father of flow, and I think that creatives will recognise this. He describes, I'm going to call him Mihaly because his first name is easier to pronounce. He describes 8 characteristics of flow: complete concentration on the task, clarity of goals and reward in mind and immediate feedback, transformation of time, so either it speeds up or it slows down depending on what you need. The experience is intrinsically rewarding, effortless and ease. There's a balance between challenge and skills. Actions and awareness are merged and losing self-conscious rumination. And there is a feeling of control over the task. So when you're writing and you just look up and go, oh, I've just smashed out 2,000 words in half an hour. I didn't even notice that the sun had set, all those kind of things. Do any of those kind of 8 characteristics sound like you being in flow?
I guess there was something about control and or setting goal and reward in the brain, wasn't there?
Clarity of goals and reward in mind,
Yeah.
and the immediate feedback. I thought I was going to do it, and yes, I've done it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it definitely plays a part. But I guess I come from a maybe slightly different angle. In the flow, it's really you are unaware of how much you're producing because. Yeah, for me, it's more. I guess flow is calibration. When the calibration is just perfect, perhaps your physical energy, your mental energy, your subconscious, your unconscious, the vision that you may have already had for the piece that you're going to work on, and the thought process that you've put in beforehand, and all those things that come together. The sunlight through the window when you're writing, perhaps the music, the ambience, the weather, all those things. When it's perfect, literally you'll look up and go, oh wow, there's
that
few hours.
transformation of time, it's just
absolutely.
gone. Yeah. I also like that there is, and for me this is an important one, I think. So effortless and ease, but there's a balance between challenge and skills. So it's still that endeavouring to create the character or put more meaning in, or say, I say back a lot, and a lot of my characters feel, and I have to go back and edit that later. Now it's being aware of those kind of up front a little bit, but that actions and awareness kind of merge, and I like that losing self-conscious rumination, so you don't necessarily self-edit, but you just kind of pour out the idea, and you're learning so much when you're in the flow because it just feels so good.
Well, in a way, it's kind of when it comes to skill, versus I guess the output, etc. You just had, while you were explaining that, it had me thinking about, remember the old HB pencils?
Yeah.
And you'd have like 6B, 5B, 4B.
Yeah.
But you could, if you start drawing a picture with like a 6B or something, it's almost like a big chunk of charcoal.
Yeah.
But you're still getting that image. You're still getting what you want to do across. But I think as you like you said, when you start to not self-edit so much, but have that skill set where you don't need to self-edit, you can start getting the finer detail because you can start shading in with like different sort of weighted pencils. You know, get down to your 3Bs, your 2Bs, your 1Bs. Now I'm struggling there because I can't remember all of. Did I go from B to H?
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
I don't remember. I remember that you did start with a fairly fat leaded pencil, and then went on to finer. And then for us, when we were in grade 3 or grade 4, we moved to fountain pen because, of course, you know, they didn't have that many biros and you weren't wasting them on children. But yeah.
Yeah, but so I think, you know, that's something I'm striving for, and I'll always be striving for, is that skill set, so that the story I want to tell is still the same. It's just the tool sets, or should I say the tools in my tool belt, I like to think are slowly growing so that I can subconsciously, unconsciously, or just, I guess, habitually, however you want to describe it, as I'm working, I'm pulling them and using them when they're needed without even thinking. And sometimes we might only have 2 tools, and then one day you get a 3rd tool in there, and it takes a while to learn how to use that tool. But eventually, when you've got, you know, a tool belt, so to speak, which I'm very, very far from. I'm not talking as though I've got a big fat tool belt, but that is the goal for me, at least. And you know, and to be in the flow and to be able to have all those tools at your disposal, which you grab almost unthinkingly. That I think that's a beautiful thing. That's the goal, isn't it? That's that magical transition that would be just such a beautiful thing to experience.
Yeah, and I think something that I often talk to, my clients if I'm doing coaching, is, you know, when they're perhaps stepping up into a leadership role or they're trying something new, is that they often neglect to acknowledge the skills that they've got and the fact that what they've learned in earlier jobs or in earlier experiences can absolutely be used in their writing in learning new things. And you know, we always try and put ourselves in boxes and go, oh well, I'm not going to be, you know, a nurse and midwife anymore, I'm now going to be a writer. All of the things that you were, the way you organised your shift or your career, is still something that you can do organising your writing career and all of those kind of skills. So I really love to see people acknowledging that everything that they were comes together, and now they're directing it towards writing, and, you know, losing that self-conscious rumination is the thing as described by Mahaley. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I love the flow stuff.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that concept of leaning into your skills, leaning into your experience. And I think there's if you can get that marriage between leaning into your experiences, and not all experiences are good, you know, not all are bad. There's a whole spectrum, of course, but we've all had such a unique array of experiences. But if we can lean into them, but also it's something that's come up so often on many of our podcasts and many of our interviews. So it's safe to say that many of us at some point at least feel a tinge of it or a lot of it, and that's imposter syndrome. Always feeling as though someone else's experiences might hold more weight or hold more value. And, you know, to realise that every experience that we each have holds just as much weight to a certain degree, as far as, you know, if you're looking for inspiration, if you're looking to understand your place in the world, the first place you can start is with yourself. And so I love the idea of leaning into, you know, all those things that you've already experienced, whether it be pain, love, sorrow, happiness, joy, confusion, excitement, you know, curiosity, all those things, all those events that have led to those emotions, and go in knowing that, I think, you know, with the confidence to say, hey, those experiences matter, and they have helped with the skill set that maybe by bringing the two together, you realise that tool belt is full of a whole lot more tools than you realise you had.
Yeah, indeed. So thank you, Kay Kerr, for giving us such a lovely, generous chat and contributing 3 books, really importantly, into the autistic own voices sphere. And I think, you know, with her novels and now her non-fiction Love and Autism, it's a great contribution to the writing community and more broadly to the world. So really appreciate your time. Thanks, Kay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kay, for being a part of the show. And I have to say, I've just had a look down at my tool belt after all that, and I've only got 1.5 HBs, and one of them's broken. Yeah, so long journey ahead.
A long journey ahead. Okay, but we have had your review, which is the book review, which is good. So don't forget, authors, if you want to be part of the Australian Book Lovers, you can go to australianbooklovers.com/for-authors and submit the details for your novel. You can submit a short story, and there's also some poetry there that you can dive in and share with people, and we're happy to chat about it and promote on social media when we can. I won't say that we're terribly regular, but we certainly do our best. And if you're a book lover and you're really looking to support Australian authors, please have a look on the website. We have hundreds and hundreds of books, and you can look under all the genres under our beautiful mascots that are there for all the genres and pick a book. And none of the funds come to us. They all still go to the authors as they, because the listings are free. They all still go to the authors, which we do need more funds for authors. And if you want to follow us on social media, we are on Twitter at Australian Books, on Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. We're also on LinkedIn and YouTube. So let us know, and don't forget, Darren has promised an opal for anyone who's going to give him a brilliant word to replace fantastic as an exclamation of joy.
Yeah, so jump on the website, and if you go to the podcast page, there's a big feedback button on the top. Click on the feedback, send us in your word, why you think it would be a much more suitable substitute for fantastic, and absolutely be in the running to an opal. And as far as, if you're a book lover, if you're an author, if you've got an event coming up, or if you've read a book that you just want to tell the world about, anything along those lines, feel free to drop us a feedback and just say, hey, I wouldn't mind joining you both for a drink in the Writers' Lounge.
Yes.
And we would happily have you join us in the Writers' Lounge, which is where I think we should maybe sneak our way down just before the end of the show, and because, it's not lights out yet. And
no, we've got quotes, we've got a blog tip from the lovely Allan to throw into the mix. So yes, more things to go.
And a tagline. But first, shall we, let's go into the seedier side of life, into the Writers' Lounge.
Do. Writers' Lounge, it's a Sunday evening, and what did I feel like tonight? I'm going to admit that I actually had a glass of wine, but then we had pancakes, and the glass of wine just didn't go with pancakes. So I was going to leave it to my guest to say what would be a nice drink for a Sunday evening. And of course, our guest is S.S. Turner, author of The Secrets of a River Swimmer. But what we're talking to him about tonight is The Connection Game. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Veronica. Great to be here.
Yeah. So what drink would you be going for in the Writers' Lounge, Simon? What's your favourite tipple?
Ooh, that's a good question. Good question on a Sunday evening.
Yeah.
In fact, I am also guilty of have already had a tipple beforehand, and I had a glass of red wine. So I feel like red wine is the perfect...
Yeah. Definitely perfect. I probably should have done that myself, but not to worry. So I'm down here on Wurundjeri country in Victoria. Where are you tonight yourself, Simon?
I'm in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, Queensland.
We're not alone. Also in the Writers' Lounge, we've got Mr. Darren Casancow. How are you this evening, Darren?
One day it'll be pronounced Casancow, but then we'll celebrate with champagne. No. Hello, everyone. And Mr. Turner, thank you so much for being part of the Writers' Lounge, because I know it was such a cool interview you had with Veronica, and I remember I had a million questions. Obviously, we'll have to say that for another interview some down track. As for drinks down in my hovel of a bar, I'm going for a scoop of ice cream, some Coke, and a whole bunch of vodka, which will make an alcoholic spider, because it's all 2 days in the bush and it didn't see a spider, come back, and we had a monster one coming from the bathroom running along the floor to attack our cat. So you just can't write this stuff.
Oh, Bobby, you can't write that. No, indeed you can't.
So it's a spider in the bar. But pretty exciting stuff. I think there's a new book maybe coming out for someone here tonight.
Yeah, indeed. So, listeners, I am going to give you the blurb, and then we're going to chat to Simon about his inspiration and when it's all available and all those kind of things. So, it was fascinating chatting to you about Secrets of a River Swimmer. Just so many questions there. So here we go, the connection game. Benny Basilworth makes connections. A rare intellect, he sees things that others don't see and draws conclusions that others completely fail to grasp. He has the kind of mind that can make a person a national sensation on the television game show, The Connection Game, and the kind of mind that can be the target of predators. Despite his brilliance, Benny and his family find themselves destitute, living in a basement apartment with one tiny window that affords them only the view of the feet of passers-by on the street above. It is from this vantage point that Benny once again starts making connections. Mad, inconceivable connections. Connections that can change lives and turn the entire world upside down. Humorous, surprising, wise, and remarkably perceptive, The Connection Game is a novel unlike any other and one that you are unlikely to forget. So there you go. Where did the idea for The Connection Game come from?
Yes, that's a good question. So I lived in London for about 10 years of my life. And soon after arriving in London, I was somewhat shocked by how expensive rents were in London. And I actually rented an apartment to save some of that rent. There was a basement apartment on a less than salubrious part of London. And it was a basement flat with a tiny, tiny window, like 6 inches high. And the only view through that window was of the passing feet on the street above. So I actually lived in the very similar place that became the scene of The Connection Game. And when I was living in this apartment, I remember very early on looking out the window at the passing feet and being a bit hypnotized by the feet. There's something quite cyclical about the walking motion, and watching these feet going past your window, it was almost like being hypnotized. Sounds funny. And and then I got to thinking, what would happen if you had this, like a genius, watching these feet and finding things behind the feet that the feet are revealing to that genius. And then that's where the idea came from. So that's the genius became Benny Basilworth, sort of protagonist in The Connection Game.
So drawn from real life.
It was drawn from real life, the actual setting. But I definitely don't. I can promise you I've not gone through what Benny Basilworth goes through in the book.
But
Fair enough.
I wonder, after putting together this book, I suspect that you might have the world's #1 skill of describing feet and shoes, because I suspect that's you had to put a lot of thought and wording into that.
Probably more than most people would feel comfortable with, yes.
Well, I think it's a pretty special superpower to have. But it's such a unique sort of viewpoint to start a story from, isn't it?
Yeah, I found it fascinating because, we all sit behind our computer screens, and we're sitting behind our computer screens effectively doing the same thing, looking at the human race and making snap judgments about what's happening. And that's where I got really excited by where the theme could go. This whole judging people from a distance without really knowing what's going on perspective. And that's, for me, that's where it got quite exciting as a theme and an idea, because I knew I could take it in directions that the reader doesn't anticipate at the beginning.
So what is the message or what's the thread, without giving any spoilers, of course, that draws Benny to make the connections? And obviously he's got the the kind of mind, etc. But what is the thread that you bring him along with?
So it's interesting. The key thread is that Benny, so his goal is to prove himself to the world, and really to prove himself to his father, who had never sort of valued Benny as a human. And so the thread is that Benny is trying to use his mental capacity to prove to the world that he understands what's going on, at large, and particularly outside his window, because he thinks there's some really scary dangers lurking outside his window. So he's got this underlying desire to prove himself. He's got this huge mental capacity, and he's also got he's certain that there are really, really big dangers just outside his window. And the thread that connects it all together is his belief that data is the king. Data will prove he's correct. So then he has to try and, from his limited vantage point and below the street level, and just watching these feet going past his window, he's got to try and bring data through his window to prove to his family and to whoever is listening that he's right, and that the street is a very dangerous place, and that the city is a very dangerous place outside.
Okay.
Is that something that is a bit of a passion for you, as in patterns or numbers? Is it something you've toyed with or just found fascinating, or how did? Because I assume, you know, collecting data and utilising that data to sort of build plots and themes and suspense, you'd have to have a bit of a love for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I definitely don't have Benny's genius when it comes to data and understanding data. But where it got really interesting, the data for me, was his wife, Belinda, discovers she's got a real talent at storytelling and creating story out of data.
Okay.
And that's what I've got a passion for. I've got a real passion for making data almost like a character that supplies incredible information that fills in the gaps in the story. So yeah, for me, the data was almost like a sort of a silent character that filled in the gaps, that allowed the story to go much bigger than it appears to be at the beginning. And definitely I've got a passion for making sense out of things through story. So yeah, definitely.
It's interesting. Information drives understanding, doesn't it? And feelings drive action too. But I think that if you start with some of the rational, logical stuff and look at data, it tells a picture. And I've found that incredibly helpful all the way through my other career, not writing. But there you go. And tell us then, how goes the launch? You know, when is the book out, and what have you been up to in the interim, or what has the book been up to in the pre-launch phase?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's going well. So pre-launch, it's all on track for like an official launch date on March 21st. So it'll be available online March 21st. And I think it then hits bookshops in Australia in May. So there's a bit of a lag to buy it at the bookshops. Yeah, and it's going well. The book recently won the Chrysalis Brew Project 2023 New Book Award, and that's
congratulations.
been fantastic.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. And since that happened, I've had more and more people ask me about the book and invite me into conversations, and I think that was a bit of a game changer for the book launch. So yeah, I was very grateful to those guys to giving me that award. And yeah, my publisher's super excited. They even put it forward for the Booker this year. So that's
fantastic.
Who knows? Yeah. Yeah, so it's been lots of good things in the background, and I'm looking forward to it. Who knows what happens when it happens, like the book launch happens. But overall, it feels like there's a really nice energy behind it.
Yeah, lovely. Are you planning a big launch yourself, or what's up? What's up in Queensland? Is the Avid Reader bookshop up there? Sometimes does quite a lot of. Brisbane's a bit far from you, though, I suppose. So
yeah, but Avid have expressed interest, I think, and there's a lovely bookshop in Delaney near where I live, for Rosetta.
Yeah,
they're going to do a book launch event just locally to me, which should be good fun.
Nice.
There's something quite special about actually meeting readers as an author, I find.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Fun.
And look, we've had lockdown, off and on over the last couple of years, so it is fantastic that authors can get out and get into the same room with their readers.
Exactly. Yeah. It's more special than beforehand, I think.
Yeah. Simon, what sort of reader is going to appreciate your book? And I know that's hard to say, because sometimes readers who never read something like yours would go, oh, I just love this. But what sort of reader do you think your book appeals to?
Yeah, I think so the genre is literary fiction, but it's essentially a psychological thriller. So it's going to appeal to people who like literary fiction, but with a bit more of a suspenseful aspect to it. So that the feedback I'm getting is most readers read the book in 1 or 2 days. So it's it's a tense book when you as you read through, and the suspense builds. So yeah, it's not your typical stereotypical thriller story by any means. There's different layers to what's going on. So I'm finding most of my readers are quite intelligent and progressive types who enjoy suspenseful books. This is a good match for that type of reader.
Well,
Okay.
something tells me there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
Now, I've got one quick question while we're sitting here enjoying a drink in the bar or in the lounge. So now feet have obviously played a part in this book with the character using data to sort of help formulate perhaps threats of danger or patterns that may offer glimpses into possible scenarios moving forward. If the angle was switched somewhat and we had a new character that could only see hands, would the hands, you think, reveal more about madness or more about love?
Yeah, and in some ways that's part of the question that the Baselworths are addressing with feet, and I think it's a roughly, well, it won't be exactly the same answer, because feet are just about, you can't lie through your feet is something the Baselworths discover, because characters walking past their windows have to travel and reveal things through their feet they're not realizing they're revealing. But I think there's more consciousness behind what people do with their hands than what they do with their feet. So I think maybe humans can manipulate their hand movements a bit more than they can their foot movements. And I think they're probably not going to be quite as accurate in terms of the impression they give an observer. But I'd like to say that they also reveal a lot about love as well, because people who use their hands a lot, often expressing positive emotions, even if they might be hiding other emotions as well. So I think that I would like to think there's an entirely new book in watching hand movements, and you've given me the idea here, Darren.
Take some notes, Simon, and just acknowledge him in the author's note at the end.
Well, I'm inspired by the occasional edit after, because Veronica gets very excited and she hits her microphone with her hands, and that's how I know she there's a lot of love in her hands.
Sorry about that. I've been good tonight, though.
No, you've been great all the time.
Yeah, I've got a new.
I'm guilty
new
of it
chord.
just as much. Yes.
We get a bit effusive with the hands. Simon, it has been lovely for you to drop in. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about The Connection Game. So listeners, don't forget, 21st of March, The Connection Game is out. Of course, it's on pre-order at the moment. So if you want to pre-order Simon's book, if it sounds like the kind of psychological thriller with a difference, with a twist for you, get yourself onto the website or all good book shop websites and jump in and order The Connection Game by S.S. Turner. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. And absolutely sounds fascinating. So I really look forward to hearing some huge success stories from the launch and from the life that the book's going to have. And no doubt it's the start. Well, it started with the River release, but this one is just showing that your momentum is only building bigger and stronger. So congratulations, and I wish you nothing but the best moving forward.
Appreciate that, Darren. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for coming in for a drink.
So, book lovers, we have another fabulous blog tip from the excellent blogger, Kay Allan. Kate is an author as well as a blogger, and she is an identical twin, as we may have mentioned before, but not the evil one. Now, no. I love that. I mean, I wish I had a twin so that I could just say that. But how does your twin feel about that, Kate?
Oh, she tells me that I'm the evil one, just even for saying it. So,
oh, very good. All right. So we have tip number 2 for blogging. What have you got for us this episode?
Yeah, today we're going to talk about weak words.
Oh, yes. One of my nasty things that sits on my shoulder like those little devils.
Yes, I think everyone definitely has their own sort of weak words.
Yeah.
That crop up every time you're writing that you don't even realise half the time, do you?
No, not until some program points it out to you or somebody helpful like you says, hey, go through and check what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. So for this blog, I've got a checklist of weak words that are the most common.
Yep.
And it's definitely, I know I'm getting to the end of a manuscript when I've got to pull this checklist out to go through it.
That's good.
It's a bit of a necessary evil, sort of a very tedious thing to be doing, but it makes a huge difference.
It does, because you don't realise as you're reading through, sometimes you're so familiar with your work, you don't realise that you've said enough, and then another sentence later you've said enough, and then 3 paragraphs down you go enough, because that just happened to be your favourite word for the day.
Exactly. I tend to use that a lot for some reason.
There you go. So, Kate, when you're doing your weak word checklist, how do you process that? What do you do with your manuscript?
Well, basically, you make your find function your friend. So whatever program you're using, you just get your find or your search function and you just type in the word. And in this checklist, there's sort of a whole bunch of words from sort of actually through to wonder. So it's all alphabetically listed, and you just sort of pop that into your search and you just see it all light up after you hit search. And you just go through, and it's not about deleting every single instance. So basically it's to look in places where you can take it out, but the sentence still makes sense. Yeah, so basically if the word adds clarity to your sentence, keep it in there. If it adds sort of nothing to it and it's just sort of bloating out your manuscript and your word count, then you can safely delete it.
Is it worth having also a thesaurus handy so that you could think, well, it doesn't fit there, but maybe another word would suit?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you can certainly put in an alternative word instead, or a lot of times you could also rewrite the sentence. So that blog has sort of those alternatives on there as well, where it shows you how you can rewrite it to make it clearer without using that word because you've used it, 50 other times.
It is amazing when you do that, because I did download your weak words many months ago. In fact, a while back, because this is a blog. I don't know whether you put this blog out again, but the weak words checklist is very helpful. And I find that, having now been a little bit more aware, there's some that I still do, as we mentioned off air, one and I and hand, there's a lot of feels, a lot of feeling in my work. So, they say you've used this more than, normally people would. You need to get rid of about 14 times. So it's tricky, but having then once seen those weak words, do you find that you've trained yourself out of it a little bit?
I like to think I have, but then usually when I'm doing the weak word checklist at the end of my manuscript, I realise, no, I haven't. I'm probably better than what I used to be because, as you said, you do get aware of the words that you use quite a lot. So you do try and not use it as much. But I think, it really does surprise me sometimes to see that I have used that again a million times. But I guess like any manuscript, the more you write, the more you get better at things. And you try and look out for those things to hopefully make the work a little less the next time you've got to do it.
That is excellent. And when you are reshaping the word, do you ever find that you then decide to completely reshape the story, or it changes the storyline, or you've realised you've got a hole somewhere?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's happened to me on more than one occasion. You sort of read it and then you think, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So, it's also good for, not just getting out the excess words, but also, making you sort of look at, because I guess you've read your manuscript so many times at this point that you've just sort of know everything that's going to happen. But then when you're sort of looking at it, I guess not from start to finish, you're sort of looking at bits and pieces. And that certainly does highlight a section. You might look at a paragraph completely differently and then go, oh, wait a minute, this changes this. So, it helps in that way as well, I think.
All that insight into your words and into the story. Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Kate. That is a very helpful tip. And we will have the link to Kate's blog on the show notes. So please stay tuned for a little bit more. But if you want to read even more of Kate's very helpful tips, go to kmallan.com, subscribe to her blog, and you will get the notification and join the thousands, literally thousands, 4,500, a bit more, of other writers who are waiting with bated breath for the next thing that Kate tells them. All right, take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Kate, for dropping in.
Thanks, V.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, lucky we got out of the lounge when we did. Of course, it's too easy to stay down there, or at least my writer's lounge is downstairs. I forgot to. I know yours always moves. Mine always tends to be sub-basement, just below the streets. Maybe where I can see a little window. But nonetheless, we got out of there just in time. It was getting a little bit too comfy. And then there's no one to edit the shows and no one to look up beautiful quotes. Which
Indeed.
What was the inspiration for your quote for this episode 77?
Well, I had, as I mentioned, the 8 Characteristics of Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I thought I would then give you one of his quotes, which was in fact, "A joyful life is an individual creation that cannot be copied from a recipe."
Oh, that's actually really, really cool.
And it kind of links the, what I was saying about leaning into all your experiences and skills and decisions and all that kind of thing. So you can't copy that from a recipe. So a joyful life is an individual creation that cannot be copied from a recipe.
Yeah, I like it. And it's also, I guess, for me, that quote sort of underlines a little bit not the need, but the importance sometimes of not basing your life against somebody else's as well.
Because true. As you were saying,
because that's not recipe you want to follow. Yeah. So interesting. Very interesting quote. Very cool.
Nice. Yeah. What do you got for us?
Well, I have a quote by Michael Altschuler, and I do apologise, listeners. I didn't check on it. I was so wrapped up in how cool the quote was. The quote, because we were talking about flow and being in the moment, and whether or not our faculties are in charge, or are we touching something beyond our subconscious. I'm not sure, but the quote is, "The bad news is time flies. The good news is you're the pilot." Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
I like that. Yeah. You can decide what to do with every moment.
Yes, and I guess I'm assuming the pilot gets in a bit of flow states as well when they're just up there in the clouds. I
hope it's still a conscious flow.
Well, but that's just it. It's the skill set, you see. So they've got this big machine, but they're in the flow. They're at one with everything, and that's what we all need to be, in the flow. But yes, a couple of fun quotes, but I did like yours. That was a really good one. But now it comes to tagline time. So any thoughts there?
Well, perhaps we can imagine that we were in the flow and just dreamily going along and finishing up with the little reminder.
Should we be like rainforest or just in some very light ambience cloud?
Light ambience, I think, effortless and ease. Let's go with that.
Okay. Okay, teacher. What shall we remember?
What we shall remember is, in fact, to read more Aussie books. Lots and lots more, please.
Oh, wow. Time just flew.
Who knew? And we've got another chock full episode. Really hope you enjoyed that one, everybody, and bye for now.
Yeah, everybody, thank you so much for being part of episode 77, and can't wait to be very soon coming to you with 78. Hope you enjoyed the wonderful interview with Kay and Veronica, and take care, everyone. Talk to you real soon.
Let's meet again, where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.